Imagine the greatest of all kingdoms, where the children of the king vie for a single spot on the throne. Today, we will witness a tragic biblical tale of violence, abuse, betrayal, and death, in which David's sons act out twisted desires that lead to acts of atrocity. Before we dive into today's content, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on our latest updates. It only takes a second, but it means the world to us. The story of Tamar and her brother Amnon is one of the most dramatic and heartbreaking narratives in the Old Testament, found specifically in the second book of Samuel, 2 Samuel 13. It stands as a chilling example of how unchecked passion, a lack of moral restraint, and flawed family dynamics can lead to disastrous consequences. Amnon, the eldest son of King David and his firstborn, harbored an unhealthy obsession for his half-sister Tamar, who was one of the most beautiful women in the entire kingdom. Driven by lust and consumed by desire, Amnon devised a wicked plan to satisfy his urges. He feigned illness and requested that David send Tamar to care for him during his supposed sickness. When Tamar arrived to tend to Amnon, he took advantage of the situation, ignored her desperate pleas to do what was right, and raped her, irreparably violating her. The Bible portrays Tamar's anguish and suffering in this terrible event. She was not only physically harmed, but also emotionally and socially scarred, left to live with a stigma that would follow her for the rest of her life. After the violent act, Amnon's lustful passion turned to hatred. Filled with contempt, he heartlessly cast Tamar out of his room. Tamar, now dishonored and devastated, dressed in mourning clothes and found solace with her full brother Absalom, who became her protector. Once a young woman, full of promise, Tamar now found herself submerged in an ocean of pain and humiliation. And the tragedy not only marked her life, but also brought turmoil to the royal family. King David, upon learning of this grievous incident, was furious, but failed to take punitive action against Amnon. This failure to administer justice within his own family reveals David's reluctance or inability to confront his son's misconduct, despite his moral and kingly responsibilities. Tamar became a symbol of suffering and injustice, and the repercussions of Amnon's crime echoed through the kingdom, affecting her identity, reputation, and the family dynamics. When news of the assault reached Absalom, David's third son, he was filled with fury and sorrow. David's apparent silence and lack of action drove Absalom into the role of a vigilante, seeking justice on his own terms. Known for his stunning physical appearance, Absalom is described in the Bible as the most handsome man in all Israel, without blemish from head to toe. However, his righteous anger turned into a calculated desire for revenge. 2 years after Tamar's violation, Absalom invited all of David's sons to a feast in Baal Hazor, creating an opportunity to exact vengeance on Amnon. At the peak of the celebration, Absalom ordered his servants to kill Amnon, avenging the wrong done to Tamar. After the murder, Absalom fled to Geshur, where he stayed for 3 years to avoid the consequences. This violent act drove a deeper rift into David's family, leading to years of tension and broken relationships. Although Absalom's act was a form of justice for his sister, it also shattered the unity of the royal household, casting a shadow of mourning over the palace. David grieved for both his murdered son Amnon and his estranged son Absalom. After 3 years, Joab, David's commander, sensing David's inner conflict and longing for reconciliation, devised a plan to bring Absalom back to Jerusalem. Joab sent a wise woman from Tekoa to present a parable to David, cleverly drawing a parallel to the estrangement between David and Absalom. David eventually agreed to allow Absalom to return to Jerusalem, but for 2 years he refused to see him face to face. While Absalom was back in the royal city, he harbored ambitions of power. Gradually he positioned himself at the city gates, interacting with those seeking justice from the king. Through charm and political cunning, Absalom won the hearts of the people, subtly criticizing David's administration and suggesting that he would be a more just and compassionate ruler. Over time, Absalom amassed a following, and, feeling secure in his support, he declared himself king in Hebron, effectively rebelling against his father. The nation was thrown into turmoil, divided between loyalists to David and supporters of Absalom. David, to avoid bloodshed in Jerusalem, fled the city, setting the stage for civil war. The conflict reached its tragic climax in the Battle of the Forest of Ephraim. During the battle, Absalom's long, beautiful hair, which had once been a symbol of his charisma, became his downfall. he was caught in the branches of an oak tree, leaving him vulnerable and unable to escape. Despite David's explicit orders to spare Absalom, Joab, the commander of David's forces, killed Absalom, ending the rebellion. Upon hearing of his son's death, David was overwhelmed with grief. His lament, recorded in 2 Samuel 18:33, is one of the most haunting expressions of a father's sorrow. "Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, if only I had died instead of you, O Absalom, my son, my son." Despite Absalom's betrayal, David's love for his son was unyielding, and the end of Absalom's life brought David profound anguish. This tragic story is interwoven with another key event in David's life, his sin with Bathsheba and the murder of her husband Uriah. After this act, the prophet Nathan confronted David and foretold the consequences of his sin, the death of the child born to Bathsheba, the presence of violence in David's house, and public exposure of his shame. All these prophecies came to pass, reflecting how David's personal failings set in motion events that deeply affected his family. In the midst of this turmoil, Adonijah, David's fourth son, also sought to claim the throne, further complicating the royal succession. While David had pledged that Solomon would inherit the throne, Adonijah attempted to seize power. With the help of the prophet Nathan and Bathsheba, David swiftly anointed Solomon as king, securing the succession and quelling Adonijah's conspiracy. However, Adonijah's later attempts to marry Abishag, David's former attendant, were seen as another grasp for power, leading Solomon to order his execution to protect his reign. The deaths of David's sons, Amnon, Absalom, and Adonijah, illustrate the complexities and consequences of unchecked sin, family conflict, and the thirst for power. However, amid the darkness, the Bible also reveals themes of repentance, forgiveness, and the pursuit of a life aligned with God's principles. These stories serve as a poignant reminder of the need for justice, integrity, and the opportunity for redemption in the face of human frailty. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you've made it this far, 2 similar videos will appear on your screen. Just click to watch. Thank you, and may God be with you.